I want to welcome you. My name is Jamie Loftus. I have the privilege of serving as the president of Cardinal Stritch University, and we're in for just a wonderful evening. We've had a great day and the real privilege of having a special moment both at mealtime, lunch, and dinner with our speakers and some friends of the university, and if I may say, you're in for a real treat tonight. Tonight's keynote address was made possible by the Kendall Lecture Series, which was established to honor the liberal arts tradition of the Sisters of St. Francis of Assisi, our university's founders and sponsoring organization. The series, the Kendall Lecture Series, is underwritten by Nancy and Lee Kendall, and they have asked us to make a difference, to do our best to reach out to this city, this country, and perhaps this world, to enable you to learn about some of the challenges that we face as a society. We're deeply grateful for their support of these kinds of lectures. Nancy is an alumna of Stritch. She raised 6 children with her husband Lee, and then returned to the classroom. Some adult learners in here, right? To pursue a Bachelor of Arts in History, and she accomplished such in 1987. Nancy served on the university's Board of Trustees from 1988 to 1994. And I know all of our students who enjoy the weekends to see our performing arts have been in the theater that bears her name, the Nancy Kendall Theater. Lee is an economist who retired in 1989 as chairman of the board of directors of Mortgage Guarantee Insurance Corporation and vice chairman of its parent company, MGIC Investment Corporation. In 1988, the university bestowed an honorary degree on Lee. He also earned his doctorate in business administration from Indiana University. So maybe we should say to him, Dr. Kendall. But in all seriousness, may we ask Nancy and Lee to please stand and allow us to say thank you for all you do to Cardinal Stritch University, Milwaukee, and beyond. We'd just like to acknowledge in a very small way a token of appreciation for all you've done. Thank you so much. You know, it's very true. While these words may be those that I read and share with you, they come from the heart, and we want you to know that Nancy and Lee personify the values that this Franciscan university embraces and cherishes. They are people of humility, and while they may shy away from recognition, we must acknowledge the great works that they have done for this university, for our students in a variety of ways, for our faculty to provide additional opportunities, resources for them to continue to be excellent. So we're again deeply appreciative of all you've done. Thank you so much to both of you. The speakers tonight were selected on their ability to encourage meaningful intellectual discussion among students and the greater Milwaukee community. We have recently tied the talks here at the Kendall Lecture Series to one of our Franciscan values, and this year we celebrate the value of showing compassion. And thanks to the generosity of the Kendalls, Stritch last year was pleased and privileged to host 7-time Emmy Award winner and co-anchor on ABC's Primetime, John Quinones. I think the name of the show that he also took particular production responsibility was What Would You Do? Was that the name of it? Yes. Sorry, I don't get out much. But in all seriousness, tonight promises to be one of special value and acclaim for you. We'd also like to extend, because it's important for us to do so, a special welcome to current and former trustees, alumni, parents, friends, to Tomorrow we're going to have a whole room full of prospective students. Maybe some of you are here tonight. This is what it's all about, right? Engagement, fun, challenging, meeting with people that are your peers, and for those with whom you can have lots of fun with and have some serious debate with so that you grow as individuals. And I think with our faculty, you'll be really impressed with your ability to grow and yet be unique. Bring your own talents and skills here. So we're again pleased for all of our students who are in the room and certainly our prospective students as well. It's really my privilege to welcome some additional folks here. The leader of the congregation that sponsors Cardinal Stritch University, Sister Florence Deacon. Welcome, Sister. We're pleased to have, along with her, Sister Margaret Cruze. And these are the women that run the congregation that sponsors Cardinal Stritch University. And as a special guest, too, we have Sister Joanne Schatzline. And Sister provides the role of liaison. So she, in effect, reports back to the congregation what we're up to here at Stritch. So we're really, again, pleased to have Sister Joanne here. And I would be remiss, folks, if I didn't also acknowledge and give thanks and for really what I consider a deep and I hope lasting friendship with one of my predecessors, and that's Sister Mary Lee Schneider, who served here for 17 years. She's been a great guiding light for me, one who knows how to push, and there are occasions when I need to be embraced, and she can do that as well. So I'm really thankful, Sister, that we have become, and I hope you share in this, friends. So thank you for being here. Again, let me introduce to you Executive Director of the MAC Fund, John Carey. The MAC Fund, for those of you who may not be familiar, is an organization entitled Midwest Athletes Against Childhood Cancer. And he's here tonight with Becky Pinter, who serves as the Chief Operating Officer of that organization. And what they do is provide research and support, and they seek dollars so that we can obviate and rid the country of childhood cancer and blood diseases. And many of you have met Irene, my lovely bride, and we've been impressed and thankful for the work that John and Becky have done in our community, along with the MAC Fund. So thank you for being here tonight, and we wish you continued success. We have other folks that we'd like to recognize, and certainly that's those that were a part of the planning. And you may see them in the hallways and perhaps recognize their names, but maybe not fully aware of their responsibilities. It's my honor to introduce and acknowledge Dr. Dan Scholes, who is the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences and also has the title of Co-Interim Vice President for Academic Affairs. Dan, if I can ask you to stand up and be recognized along with your committee co-chairs. Yeah. I think it's important that we also acknowledge all the work that folks have done in making tonight's evening possible, from an administrative side of things, again, the Kendall Lecture Series, but folks on our advancement team and our advancement committee, our St. Clair Center people, and certainly Irene, my wife, who gets a lot of work done, and I appreciate all of your contributions here tonight. So just briefly, if you could stand and be recognized, all those who have been a part of making tonight possible in advancement, and Irene and others. Well, given these introductory comments, we should be out of here by 11 or so. So I just want you to know one more thing, and that is this idea, in a very serious way, of our university value this year of showing compassion. We try tirelessly, I might suggest to you, to continually educate our students about offering unselfish compassion and recognizing the responsibilities as human beings to give of one another and to one another. And I steal a line from a place that I used to work, but it rings true, and that's that notion of what we're hoping to do here at Stritch is enrich the lives of our students so that they can enrich the lives of others. And I'm deeply grateful for the commitment that all of those in this university community make to that end. But tonight is about a story, a very special story, a heartfelt story, and a story that will challenge each of us. And we're privileged to hear from two very special individuals who not only embody compassion, but have taken the time to remind us to live our fullest each and every day. As I tried to remark briefly at lunchtime, it's this idea that their daughter has brought to us, and they'll certainly share more of that. I don't intend to steal any of the thunder or the message, but to live an awesome life and to try to do that with each and every moment. And our guests tonight are Lori and Wayne Earl, whose family story inspired the book and the movie The Fault in Our Stars. And they've graciously offered to share some insights tonight. They are the parents of the late Esther Earl and founders of the nonprofit organization This Star Won't Go Out, whose mission is to financially assist families struggling through the journey of children living with cancer. And their story is in part that about Esther, their daughter, who was diagnosed with cancer at the very young age of 12. And they are going to share with us tonight how life is not measured in days, but by love. And we have an introductory video that we'd like to share. And when that is completed, we'll ask Wayne and Lori to come up. So Wayne and Lori, on behalf of everyone here tonight, we're pleased to have you and look forward to your comments. And our students need to be in bed by midnight. So thank you all. And here's the video.
And finally tonight, Hollywood learned something this weekend. Never underestimate the power of a story about taking a chance in the time you have. It is a love story, no special effects. It's a blockbuster earning $48 million, and Tom Cruise and his alien attacks earned just $29 million. ABC's John Donvan now tells us about a message that may live forever.
It's inspiration that sold out the theaters this weekend. The girl in the movie...
Why are you staring at me?
Because you're beautiful. Hazel, who laughed and loved and lived with cancer.
She was diagnosed when I was 13.
Oh man, I heard a cancer story.
Your real story. Came from John Green's bestseller, The Fault in Our Stars, which had its own inspiration. Someone named Esther Earl, who was not Hazel, because Esther was real. She was a little girl in the 1990s, and then she grew. And then she got sick with cancer.
Yours has a lot more shape to it.
She met John Green when he was already a famous author, and she was a fan.
Esther was an amazing kid. She was astonishingly empathetic. She was really thoughtful. She was very funny.
He says it was that spirit in Esther that inspired him to invent Hazel and her insight. To want a full life and to know it might not happen, what do you say to that? Esther's videos made her a minor celebrity online.
I'm not always amazing. And I'm not always awesome, and I'm not always strong, and I'm not always great. And you guys should know that.
John says, Esther taught him that a short life can be a good life, a meaningful life. And he's absolutely right.
It was short. Esther died almost 4 years ago at 16, never seeing when she inspired this.
I fell in love with him the way you fall asleep.
A movie her mom told us she would have loved. This kid, this young woman who did not get to go past young. John Donvan, ABC News, Washington.
And Esther's parents said they think she might have seen the movie twice.
So, it is such a privilege to be here. Again, thank you for allowing us to share a personal story tied into a story that you were reading here at Cardinal Stritch University. And it is Now, how many of you have read The Fault in Our Stars? All right. How many of you have seen the movie? All right. And how many of you know that the book was dedicated, well, now you know that the book was dedicated to our daughter Esther, and her words are here, and we're going to be sharing a lot from her words tonight as we talk to you about her story. We named Esther Esther Grace Earl because we wanted to remind ourselves of a famous Hebrew queen who at a timely manner was there to save her people. And that story had always impressed us, and it seemed to fit our new daughter that came into our family. We called her Esther Grace because we didn't want to forget about God's grace. This grace, justice, we all know what justice is, right? That's getting what you deserve. And mercy, which is not getting what you deserve. And then there's grace, and grace is bigger and greater than those things, because grace is really the only antidote to suffering and evil. And, it's kind of the only answer to that question, why? The question I don't usually ask. So it's no accident that John called his character Hazel Grace, because he was impressed by that same notion of the grace that encompasses and overcomes when things are difficult. This is not advancing, but maybe I'm doing it wrong. There we go. That was supposed to be up while I was saying Esther Grace. So that's on her first birthday. Esther was born, we always say, with hair. It's over here. All right. Gotcha. We'll get this figured out. Technology. I teach at a community college part-time, and technology, you gotta love it, and it works as well as, oh, there we go. Okay. Esther was born with hair. We always say hair and freckles, but her hair was, when we look back at the pictures, we realized it was present from the first moment. It just kind of stuck up. It was always there. It was flyaway. It was very, very soft. I remember when she was quite little, taking her into the grocery store, and she's sitting up in the top seat, and somebody in line, the clerk, said, "Oh, bad hair day." And I was so offended. I love her hair. And I told the lady that. I said, "What? No, I love her hair." So not all bad hair days are unintended. And then her doctor called her a lean, mean machine because she just was muscle and strength. And when she was in second grade, she was the only girl that could climb up the rope challenge to reach the roof of the gymnasium and earn the privilege of writing her name on the ceiling. She just was very strong, and it was a big part of who she was. There we go. I'm getting it. Esther was also really demonstrative. Her empathy was clear very early on. I remember when she was just little, and she would come out and she'd say, "Mom," to my cheeks. She'd put her hands on my face. "Mommy, I love you." Hold my cheeks. One story that demonstrates her empathy is the story when she was helping her younger brother, Graham. You can see them there. That's about the age they were. And she was putting suntan lotion on him because he needed help. Our son Graham has some special needs, and he's the closest in age to Esther. And he put that lotion on. He put the lotion on and got some in his eyes, and he started crying. And she said, "Oh, no, Graham, it doesn't hurt. Look." And so she put some on her own eyes, and then they both ran screaming to get help because it actually did hurt. So her life was full of empathy, and she demonstrated that from a very early age.
We wanted to read something from the book. Page 33, Esther talks about what's important to her. She says, from a wall poster labeled "Interview with the Class," here are a few of the questions Esther answered about her life as a 5th grader. What do you like best about yourself? Her answer, my hair and freckles, baby. And I mean, she had this just freckle face, and it was amazing to see them come out in the summer. I said somewhere that we measured the summer not by a date on the calendar, but by the number of freckles appearing on Esther's face. The next question is, what would you do if you saw someone being made fun of for stuttering? And she said that she would ask if they wanted to sit with her at lunch, play computer games at my house. I said, do you have any fears? And she said, yeah, crashing in a plane, a car, a boat, or getting hurt while alone at home. Nicknames? Esty, Star. Heaven, what do you think about heaven? She said, I think it will be perfect and everything will be cooler than cool. Let me just read one other one too right here on the Esther, just briefly. All About Me poster. This is from 2nd grade. 5 words to describe me are nice, smart, fun, funny, and sweet. One thing that makes me special, my middle name is Grace. My favorite book is Harry Potter. My favorite food is pizza. My favorite sport is soccer. My favorite animal is a cat. And when I have time all to myself, I like to read and write. And when I grow up, I want to be an author. Well, she did become an author, and we did end up having 5 children. I don't know how it happened, but I'm still trying to figure that out. The last one was a surprise, but a gift. He came 9 years later. Esther and her older sister were at the birth. My oldest daughter was 14. She said, the nurse and midwife said this was a great way to teach birth control. And also, Esther said, when I grow up, I'm adopting. She got out of that. But she cut the umbilical cord for her brother Abraham. It was quite a gift.
When we had our 5 children, we had lived with 4 of the children in the Middle East for a few years teaching. But we moved to France, and I think this picture does such a great job of showing how much Esther loved animals. They seemed to gravitate to her. She was, she wasn't the patron saint of animals, but she loved animals. She and her sister when we were living in Saudi Arabia still, there they don't really have pets per se. There are some animals around, but they're not necessarily pets. And there were a lot of feral cats. And one day, Esther and her sister Evangeline came across these kids, and they were playing a toss game. And they were tossing something back. You know how you toss a ball, and then you take another step farther to challenge yourself. And eventually, Esther they realized that they were tossing a kitty. And they were horrified, and they used their limited Arabic, la, no, don't do that. That's our cat. And so the kids who were playing gave the cat to them, and that became the beginning of many cats in our home. It was a couple days later before we found out about the first cats. I think it was the meowing that gave it away.
I heard a meowing. They said, "Oh, Dad, that's just my stomach." So you can't hide kittens for very long.
No, you can't hide kittens for very long. And later, when we had come back to the States, Esther got to adopt 2 other cats, Pancake, her black cat, and Blueberry, who was all white and profoundly deaf. Esther loved Blueberry because of his special needs, and she took good care of him. We tried to never let him go outside because he just would do things like lie down in the street. So we kept him in the house. But Pancake was her special companion, and throughout the rest of her life, Pancake would sleep on her bed when Esther was sick and began using a BiPAP at night because even the oxygen wasn't enough. Pancake had a whole tradition. He'd do his claws on the blankets. Any of you have cats? And then you'd think he was getting ready to settle down, and he'd crawl up on top of her, and he'd lick the moisture from her BiPAP tube, and then he'd settle down right on top of her lungs, and she'd be like, "Oh, Pancake." And she'd try to shove him off a little bit. But she just loved cats. We actually got, through the hospital staff, it was legal, but sort of secretive. We were able to bring a special visitor to her when she was in for a very long stay at the hospital. And she writes about it in her journal, in her writings. She says, so at noon, my two sisters and my brother Graham were standing over me, shaking me slightly, and what sounded like screaming at me to wake up. I was completely confused as to what was going on, but they handed over a large box with a pet logo on it and set it on my lap. By this point, I was gaining consciousness enough to think that they were giving me some sort of cat-shaped cake. But no! Upon opening the box, a black cat jumped out. Hello, pancake. So she talks about how they had organized to sneak him into the hospital room, where he purred happily on her legs. She says, it feels so nice to have my kitty with me, even be it in the hospital. Oops. At this point, Esther, I forget I have to do it over here. At this point, Esther had begun getting tired. We were living in France. She was lean, mean machine, right? And she'd walk everywhere. We didn't have a car. We took the bus. And she'd say, oh, I'm tired. And we'd say, come on, Esther, get moving. And then she began to cough, and we said, something's wrong. And we took her in being worried that maybe she had some kind of pneumonia or a bronchitis, or in France, you've been worried about tuberculosis. And the x-rays showed fluid in her lungs. And when they examined the fluid, they drained it from her chest, and she had over 1.5 liters, and they said, it's not bacterial. And it was on Thanksgiving Day then that they told us, oh, it's très mauvais, very bad. It's cancer, it's thyroid cancer, but it's already in her lungs, and the prognosis isn't very good. At that time, we decided to move back to Boston, and where we had been living before we were in France. And here you can see a picture in Boston, in the hospital.
And Esther was very sick. She did have surgery in France, and we came back, obviously, for a second opinion, and decided to stay in Boston. They asked us if we could stay for 2 to 3 years at the time, and we said that's fine. We loved overseas living. We loved that whole life, having lived in Saudi and Belgium and in France, and it was a dream. So we thought 2 or 3 years, we can do that, and then we'll be back overseas. And it wasn't until later we realized that they were saying, you know, she's on a trajectory that's 2 or 3 years of decline, and she's not going to get better. And we didn't want to hear that. But Esther was very sick, and there were stretches of time when, you know, one or both of us were at the hospital every night with her. She was never left alone at the hospital. Her sisters, friends, or one of us or both of us were there through those days and those years. But she got very sick when she was 14. And there's a scene in the Tiffios, The Fault in Our Stars movie, where Hazel Grace is 13 and she's sick, and they think she's going to die. And the parents are there, of course, and the mother's having to let her go. And in real life, I mean, obviously, Lori was there, and Esther had coughed up blood, and we were told that if you know, a tumor burden were to puncture the lining of the lung, she would start bleeding, and that's what we thought happened, because she coughed up blood and raced to the hospital, and you know, carried her out there just like it is in the movie. But the nursing staff seemed to be kind of nonchalant. Oh, Esther, you're back here again, and you know, you're in the ICU, and I'm thinking my daughter's dying. And so I'm down there saying goodbye to her and trying to have a conversation about how precious she was. And I was sobbing, which is not something I do, even though I may get teared up now. I was crying, and I said, how can I live without you? And she said, Daddy, you got to promise me that when I die, you won't be sad. And I said, right. I can't make that promise. But I will promise you that I will live, and I will use your life as an example of courage, you know, and compassion. And gratefully, she did get better. She did get much better. But she told me she didn't want me to be too sad, and I wrote during that time in our own way in our journals and on Caring Bridge, and it appears in the book here. I talk about suffering. I said Esther's not doing well. Next week they're going to be putting in one or more shunts, tubes for draining fluid, and it's looking bad. And I say Esther's game to keep fighting, so we're not giving up hope. But still, suffering seems a useless business. I see no value in my daughter's pain. And I know the standard answer is redemptive, a result of sin, an evil attack. There's some bigger purpose. But the only reality is mystery, and that won't do. Our faith remains, but it's changed. We've put away childish things. We talk about death and dying and living and loving, and we wait and try to dream a little together each day. Esther knows more about these things than any 15-year-old should. The grief for us is like a tightening of the chest, a closing in, a sadness and an anger, and mostly a helplessness. I can't do anything to make my little girl's pain go away, and she's so perfect to me. And I wish I could tell you more, but those treasures are ours for now. Thank you for waiting with us.
So Esther got better. One of Esther loved stories and words. When she was 4 and we were living in the Middle East at the time, I said, I was homeschooling the kids a little bit. And so I started her on this 100 lessons to easy reading. And I think we got to about lesson 20, and by then she was just reading, so we just quit the lessons. And so when the Harry Potter books came out, she and her sister we finally had to buy 2 copies because they'd each be reading and fighting over the books. She loved the stories because he had so much courage, to start from overcome such obstacles and use his magic for good and care about making a difference for people. She began writing in journals from the time she was about maybe 6 or 7. And while her book just concentrates on the last 2 years of her journal writing, she wrote stories. She had one about this vegetable. It was the time of Veggie Tales, but hers was all about a fruit family. And she would draw the characters to go with it, and she'd entertain us with these stories that she would write. But she knew how powerful words were and how important they were for learning life's lessons. In here she talks about, back to glasses. Oh, that's a different number.
There you go, right there.
She talks about writing here when she says, this is in 2009, she says, I feel so useless. So she'd been sick. She'd come home. She was recovering. She'd gotten a wig. And she was trying to find a way to use her life. I feel so useless, and I know it's late, and I'm tired, and I'm upset, and I should be sleeping, but I feel the need to write. This will probably be short. I feel so useless because, I don't know, it would make no difference if I died. What I mean is not that I'm suicidal. I just have not done anything other than get on the computer for the past year. Yeah, I can't do much else, but seriously, I want to make a difference, to help someone, and I don't know how. Helping someone would make me feel good, like I did something productive for a change, thus helping myself too. Maybe one day. So compassion was a big piece of who Esther was. And she was doing things, she just didn't recognize maybe the impact that they were having. She got involved in Harry Potter, and then she got involved with, through Harry Potter actually, she found out about these cool 2 brothers named John and Hank Green, who did this vlog where they talked back and forth on the computer, vlogging. Does everybody know what vlogging is? So blogging is writing on the online, and vlogging is videoing online. So she started a video collaboration with some friends that she had met online, and she began eventually a YouTube channel. She got involved in this community that surrounded John and Hank Green, and they are described as, just I think their mission statement is to increase awesome and decrease world suck. And to do that through getting involved in social change, getting involved in charity, getting involved in doing things with your life to make a difference in this world. So she told us in about the time that article was written, that blog was written, she told us about this amazing convention called LeakyCon. The very first one was coming up, and it was going to be in Boston. It was a celebration of Harry Potter fandom, but John Green was going to be there. And she was so excited. The colliding of her favorite worlds were coming together, and it was right in our town where we were living. So she was thrilled about it. She was going to meet all these YouTube people that she had, interacted with online, this online community. And for her, she didn't get to go to school all the time. There were many days that she was homesick. We sort of did a combination of school and homeschooling and no school, unschooling. Unschooling is the official word, right? So she got to go to LeakyCon. We took turns as family members taking her each day. You can read more about that in her journals, but you can hear her own voice right here after she encountered John for the first time.
Yes, that's right. I saw John Green. And then I was like, okay, well, I really want to take a picture with him. So my sister walked in because I couldn't talk. I was like, and I was drinking water, and my water was like this in my cup. It was like shaking all over the place, so I had to throw it out, otherwise it would spill. And she went up to him and she's like, can I take a picture with you with my sister? And so we went up and we took a picture with him, and he gave me a hug, and he was like, what's your name? And I was like, Esther, and he's like, oh, that's a nice name. And then I was like, you're awesome, because I couldn't say anything, so I was like, you're awesome, like really awkwardly blurted it out, and he was like, you're awesome too. And so then he said, are you going to see you tomorrow, because there's like a Nerdfighter Nosh thing tomorrow. And I was like, yes. And then we left. And it was like really awesome, and yeah, that was the picture that was playing. So it was awesome.
She likes the word awesome. Esther had begun to develop a real community online. She actually had begun to become acquainted with some friends. We checked up on her. We didn't just leave her without any guidance. Who are you talking to? Are you sure they're really the age they say they are, and all that kind of stuff. But she began to make these friendships, and we'd get to talk to some of them and online, and this is just an example of the kinds of crazy things. I mean, they would spend hours and hours communicating, playing games online. Pictionary was a favorite. Watching favorite series together of TV shows or competitions. There was some debate competition they were all watching together. It met a real need for her, for friendship and community. And a lot of times we get afraid of the internet, and we talk about all the terrible things that happen with the internet. And yet there's some amazing things that happen through friendships and through relationships. I mean, right? Maybe there's somebody here who met their partner for life through the computer. I don't know. Any volunteers? So John Green does the introduction to Esther's book, and he says in here, I dislike the phrase internet friends because it implies that people you know online aren't really your friends, that somehow the friendship is less real or meaningful to you because it happens through Skype or text messages. The measure of a friendship is not its physicality, but its significance. Good friendships, online or off, urge us toward empathy, right? They give us comfort and also pull us out of the prisons of ourselves. I imagine that part of Esther was sad to give up the illusion that she was going to be okay with her internet friends, but what followed was a revelation for all of us. Our internet friendships were real and they were powerful, and they became more real and powerful when Esther and her friends were finally able to acknowledge and openly discuss the truth about her illness. And then he says again about Esther, and says the quote here. I mentioned earlier that when Esther kept me off the dance floor that night in 2009, it wasn't the last time she saved me from catastrophe. In fact, she is still saving me all the time. In these pages and in my memories, she reminds me that a short life can also be a good and rich life, that it is possible to live with depression without being consumed by it, and that meaning in life is found together in family and friendships that transcends and survives all manner of suffering. As the poet wrote in the Bible's Song of Solomon, love is strong as death, or perhaps even stronger. Make-A-Wish is an amazing organization, and for several years they had, well, not been after Esther, but they had come to visit at our house a couple of times so that Esther could pick her Make-A-Wish. And no, those of you who have watched The Fault in Our Stars, she did not go to Orlando. In fact, that was suggested several times, and she'd say, what am I going to do with an oxygen tank? Really? And then, how about a Sephora makeup spree? And she wanted it to be something that had more meaning for her than that. She did love makeup, and she was known for her beautiful eyeshadow and crazy socks that were always mismatched. And but she finally decided on her Make-A-Wish, and she said, you know what, let's go on a road trip and go meet all of my online friends in person. We're like, awesome, exactly, let's do that. And then she got sicker, and we couldn't do that. And so in the end, we finally settled on a Make-A-Wish that was in Boston, and some of her online friends were brought to her. And we had a fabulous week of 4th of July with all kinds of events, a Harry Potter wizard rock band concert, and visits to the movie, and watching the fireworks together over the Charles River in Boston. So it was a wonderful event, and that was when she met John. John came and spent time with them for a day and an evening, and it was a magical time.
Just go here.
So this is another picture of just Esther and her care for children, her empathy that she showed. This was actually a fundraiser for her, and she spent her time entertaining the kids. Esther wasn't really getting better, but she still was worried about wasting her life. One of the things she got to get involved in was the Harry Potter Alliance, and that's a social activism group wrapped around the stories of originally Harry Potter, but now using all kinds of stories of popular culture to activate young people into making social changes and working on social justice issues. And there was a campaign that was sponsored by Chase Community Bank for the winner of the organization that had the most popular votes for the video that they published would win a $250,000 grant. So Esther got super excited about it and involved. John Green heard about it. He published it and said, let's vote with Esther. And through that collaboration, the Harry Potter Alliance did end up winning the grant for $250,000. When it was awarded, back on that previous one, when it was awarded, they wanted to get her down to Florida for the award ceremony, and we couldn't find an airlines that would let her fly with her oxygen needs. And so they live streamed her in, Skyped her in, and so you can see Esther, the image that they saw at the event, and then down in the little corner there on the left, you can see what she could see at home as she watched everything. And people would come through in lines and say hi to her, and so that was a pretty meaningful experience for a little girl who couldn't leave home to go to this event. Esther Day was an event. Has anybody ever heard of Esther Day? We have a few fans out there. So Esther Day was thought up by John and Hank Green, and they approached Esther and said, you know what, on your birthday, which is August 3rd, we were getting close to August 3rd, 2010, we want to celebrate your birthday. And so we'll do every August 3rd on your birthday, we will talk about whatever topic you want. So, ooh, it could have been, I don't know, how many hamburgers can you eat in one day, or any topic. And she thought about it for a couple of days, and she came back and she said, well, I think that I'd like you guys to talk about family and love and telling the people in your life that you don't usually, that you love them. So for the first time ever online, John said, I love you to his brother Hank in their weekly videos. That was one thing they never did. And so he has a really great video that you can watch where he hems and haws his way through to saying Happy Esther Day. I love you to Hank. And so the point of Esther Day became the day that you would, like Valentine's, but Valentine's is for romance. That's easy. But to tell your mom or your brother or your sister or your aunt that you love them, somebody that's really special in your life and they've meant a lot, but it's hard to say those words. So the very first Esther Day was celebrated then in 2010. Esther loved her family. This is a picture of all of us, taken in 2000 and
It was the last
Nine?
year. No, 2010.
2010.
Mm-hmm.
2010. I remember you wanted her to take off her.
Yes.
You
Yes,
wanted her to take off her oxygen.
I asked her to take off her oxygen cannula, but she said, no, Dad, I'm not going to do it. I said, Esther, please do it just for me. She said, no, I'm not going to do it for you, Dad. This is who I am. This is the way that things look. This is the way that things are. But her family was everything to her, and she loved her sisters and her brothers. She was the center of the family. She was our hub child. Let's go to the next one then. And sadly, Esther passed away a few weeks after her 16th birthday. And, I'd always thought of it as other people's children die. Other people's children die. And in fact, I'm not in denial or anything. I mean, I'm a college teacher and I've taught death and dying courses and all of that. But I was imagining this idea that other people's children die. And then a year after Esther died, we had at the Dana-Farber Jimmy Fund, we had a special memorial time like we did today, not a mass, but a secular memorial time, and with flowers. And I watched all those people going up and people with their names being read on the screen. And I thought, why, look at all those poor people who have lost their child, And then they said Esther's name, and of course we were going up to get a rose as well. And it wasn't like one dramatic moment, but it was an understanding that, there is no such thing as other people's children. When one person has cancer, they are part of us, right? John Donne, no man is an island. We are all connected. And there's no such thing as another person's child dying. And I was speaking at an event, and a woman came up, and all she said was, my son was a Marine, and he didn't come home from Iraq. He was 25. And there's just this sense of knowing, because we've lost the child together. But you don't have to have lost somebody to know what it means to lose something. And there is no such thing as other people's children. Esther knew she was dying, and we were there, and it's in the book. Obviously, we didn't share everything. One of the things that we didn't share was that after she passed away, leading up to that, I was angry with God. We're people of faith, and I was upset through the whole process of her being ill and dying. I'm kind of you have the protest Job, and you have the compliant Job, in the book of Job. You have the one Job who's like, okay, God, whatever you do, and the other Job who is like, you're not going to do this and get away with it. So I'm much more the protest Job. I'm trying to get to the other place, but that's where I was then, especially, and just upset about this whole thing, upset with God. But I said we are going to read the 23rd Psalm, and we are going to pray the Our Father, and we're going to do these things because when things are awful and they've fallen apart, you don't just, God's not there for the good times. And so we prayed, and we read the scripture. And we knew that we were losing her, and we had to say goodbye to her. And I was very grateful that we had those resources. And then Esther left us, and I stood at the edge of the bed, and I said, with my girls there, and our sons were there too, but they were asleep, and a few other friends who had been hanging around were outside waiting, and one friend of Esther's was there as well. And I said, now she belongs to the heavens. You know, thinking of Abraham Lincoln, of course, thinking of this great person, this great soul who had gone on. And we went home, and within an hour, John Green had tweeted it, sent it out, and I knew that by hitting the button on her going, that there would be such an enormous response of sadness, and of course there was. We heard about all those things later. But, you know, when Jacob is wrestling and he's becoming Israel, and he's wrestling, he says to God, what does he say? I will not I will not let you go until you bless me. And of course the Lord blesses him with with a physical disability, right? Well, you know, I'm still wrestling with God, but that's another story for another day. But I didn't have to wrestle with saying goodbye to Esther, because she had already blessed us. She had already blessed us so much.
So we all have a choice, right? We have a choice in a lot of things in our lives. Get into those discussions in class sometimes. Philosophy, you teach about free will, but this isn't a theology class tonight. But we do have a choice in how we deal with the things that we face. We don't get to always choose the troubles that confront us, but we do get to choose how we react to them. And so, Esther all along exhibited such amazing strength and purpose and commitment to making a difference with the time she had, knowing it wasn't long, knowing that she couldn't change that, but what could she do with what she had? And so we couldn't do anything less after she was gone. So the first thing we did was said, we had been at Esther's Make-A-Wish. One of her friends, her IRL friend, had created these bracelets for Esther that said, this star won't go out, because Esther means star. And so Esther wore these, which is one of the reasons I love them. And John went home from his Make-A-Wish and was wearing it on his video, and pretty soon people were like, oh, we want to buy one, where can we get one? And so through John's merchandise company, they started selling the bracelets to create a fund. When Esther left us, we said, well, what are we going to do with these monies? And so we started This Star Won't Go Out, a foundation in Esther's honor and in her memory, to make a difference for people. And one of the purposes of This Star Won't Go Out is to provide support for families. A lot of people know that you can have medical expenses, but you can have other expenses that aren't medical expenses. I remember going through a hard time and contacting a large cancer organization to see if they had any funding, and they did. They would reimburse you for your travel expenses. But we lived 9 miles from the airport, or from the hospital in Boston, so that wasn't very helpful when you were trying to come up with rent and utilities and things like that. And so that's what one of the things that This Star Won't Go Out does, is to give out grants to families, usually in the amount of their month of mortgage or rent payment. Because the last thing you want to be worrying about when you're in the hospital with a child who's sick is how you're going to pay your rent or pay your mortgage bill, or whether you can keep on your electricity and your gas. So the foundation has been a meaningful thing for us, and it's ongoing, and we hope to see it do a lot more with moving forward and providing not just financial support, but also participating, like Mac's Fund that's here tonight, with raising awareness and advocacy for childhood cancer, because it's a horrible fact that 36 children are diagnosed every day with cancer, and that more children are diagnosed every year with cancer than in the past. It's increasing. Survival rates are increasing too, but then you've got all the host of chronic illness things that come along with survivors of cancer. So we want to be part of making a difference.
And then the movie.
the movie.
John, of course, dedicates his book to Esther, and he asks us if that's okay. He says, I went home, I was upset, and I threw out the book I was writing and decided to write this different book, which became The Fault in Our Stars, based on a 16-year-old protagonist who has the same cancer that Esther had, and a similar kind of a spirit. So we had to think all of about a split second and say, that would be fantastic. We could just hear Esther fangirling now, so excited about what you're doing. And he dedicated it to her, and his book, of course, became a big hit. And then later the movie came out, and we got to go to the premiere this summer, which was fantastic with all these people. You know, you see somebody was screaming, "Oh, the Kardashian Jenner's up there running, you know, sitting up there," and I'm thinking, who are these people? So I asked my other daughters, who are these people? And they're like, we don't know who they are. And then I secretly saying, good, we raised them right. They don't know who they are. I know more about them than they know about them, right? Fantastic. So, and Lori was up there, you know, close enough to smell Al Gore's breath, and you know, he's about 9 feet tall, and they're just all lovely people. John Green, of course, was a big celebrity. What a gift to be able to go to that meeting. I was so afraid that I would see Esther in the film, having read the book, and that I would, only to lose her again. And I've just decided, the idea of seeing somebody, to lose them again would be too much. And besides, my sons would know Esther through this movie, or kind of get a sense of, trying to disconnect her from this person. But I came out of it feeling like they'd done a good job as an original story, honoring Esther's memory, and it was a gift. It was therapeutic to be able to go through that process. Our daughter Abby called it a hard good thing. And then on this, is that slide not there?
I think it's there. Can you see something?
No. The sun? Oh, we can go to, is there another one?
Oh, no. Well, there was one more.
Okay. We met, you know what? It must not have shown up, but it was just a picture of Esther's book in Brazil. The star will never fade. So the book has been. Esther's book came out because I promised her that I would write her story. I sent it to John Green because I knew how much he loved her, and he said, "Can I send this to my publisher, to my editor?" And we had to check with our daughters and say, because their diaries are going to be exposed, and they agreed it would be fantastic that Esther would want that, never imagining that it would also go to the New York Times bestseller list right away and be a fantastic book that touched a lot of people. And when you read people's comments about the book, and they say things like, "I'm so glad this was made with that extra thick paper so that it could absorb my tears," or I just keep reading this hoping that there'll be a different ending next time. And you realize how attached they've become, how meaningful it is to them. You realize that we've been given this great gift of sharing Esther's hopeful story. And then Esther Day continued on, and now we're into the 5th year, and this year it was celebrated in Florida with 5,000 people, and pounds and pounds of these paper stars were let loose at midnight on her birthday, August 3rd of this past summer.
And all the participants filled out postcards to people to say "I love you," and then en masse they were mailed all together from the convention to celebrate Esther Day, a day when, and then different groups around the country did events surrounding Esther Day, because we all need more gratitude, we all need more love, and compassion and gratitude, you can't really separate those two words very much. Compassion is love, but part of that's demonstrated through the gratitude to people around us, and a heart full of gratitude, and that's really what's celebrated in Esther Day.
We wanted to end with this brief recollection. On the next slide is our family today as it stands, and we did this a couple of days ago when our daughters were visiting. Any way we can get them out to visit us is fantastic. The older ones are away at school and living in California. They came home, and we took this picture, and our little Abe, who's now 11, was wearing I love, I Star Esther t-shirt, and so she's always with us. But when Esther was younger, when we were younger, we lived in a small town in Massachusetts, and near a cemetery, and I would often take walks with the kids. But I especially, liked going with Esther because the older girls had more important, sophisticated things to do, and so I would take her. and Graham, who was tiny. And we'd walk to the cemetery, and she'd ask me about the gravestones. And so a few months after Esther died, I wrote this story. Well, here it is. It's just very short, and then another comment to make. And then we'll have time for a few questions. But this is called Autumn. As they moved between the rows of gravestones, he asked his daughter if she knew what they meant. Well, they're there so their families can find their relatives, she answered with uncertainty in her voice. True, her dad responded, chuckling. But it's more than that. It's because these people once lived. And even though there are names and dates and sayings on the gravestones, after a while no one alive will remember any of the people buried here. But we show respect for them because they lived. And these granite monuments last a very, very long time. And they represent eternity. But even they will eventually crumble into dirt. Everything must finally die. He said, he finished with a sadness in his voice. She leaned in and put her arms around his waist. But you won't die soon, will you? She asked, sincerely looking up into his now reddened eyes. Well, I have no plans to, but I'm not in charge of that, he said, returning her embrace. For a minute they were silent, looking around at the stones and trees whose leaves hung on defiantly in the face of those early days in October. Her dad broke the silence. He said, smiling, I really can't die anyway. Well, what do you mean, Daddy? Well, there's something bigger than death. There is something stronger still. Do you know what that is? He asked. God, she answered. Yes, but remember it's love. It's love, isn't it? She interrupted excitedly. Love is more than this. I remember from Sunday school. God is love, and nothing can separate us from God's love. Yes, you are so smart. Think about it, he said, moving one arm in a sweeping motion as if to collect all the names and dates around them. Every one of these people was once loved by someone. There was a day when their loved ones gathered around these spots to bury their grandparents, friends, moms, dads, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters. They would have cried and cried, knowing that they would never again hold them in this life. But even though most of these people are now forgotten by us, they are still loved by God. And because of that, they can never be truly forgotten. They can never really die, she whispered, as if trying to keep this one big secret just between the two of them. In the quiet, he gently held her head close to his side, occasionally swallowing up her unbroken hair in his large hands while she kept her arms locked around his waist, this father and daughter, alone and keeping vigil for the remembered dead. Soon a strong wind, rude and proud and blustering, arrived to shake loose a cluster of leaves from a nearby tree. Unyielding, these first fruits of autumn shot upward in an attempted escape before gravity arrested them. And so began a reluctant but inevitable waltz downward toward the earth.
So I want to share with you what Esther shared with us. She said, do you want to hear about my idea of heaven? She wrote this before it was the end. She says, maybe, or maybe not, you're interested in hearing my heaven? My heaven, and she draws a picture, which I can't show you there, but it's in color in the book. She says, my heaven would be this all green hillside with a really blue sky and lots of pink and colorful flowers that's completely calm and serene that I could run and run and run through without oxygen. It'd just be really nice. Maybe one day I'll get to do that. She says, I do hope that when the day comes, whether in 1, 10, or 100 years, I don't want you to think of me and feel sad. She says, even now while I'm alive, don't think of me and say, poor girl, it's sad, she's sick. Not that you do that. Think of me and think of the sunshine and how I love animals and drawing something nice, like this smiley. We came to the dedication of the book, and we, because you write the book first and then you dedicate it, and we said, oh, of course we should dedicate this to our star. And then we realized, but the book's really by Esther, with just some of our added comments and thoughts in there. So we can't dedicate it to herself. So who should we dedicate this book to? And so we said, who would Esther want to dedicate it to? what would Esther want us to remember? What would Esther want us to take away after reading this book about her life that was too short, but was full and awesome? And so we dedicated it, and you can see it there on the screen as well. We said, to all who long to live life fully and love deeply, no matter the obstacle or length of days. And our hope is that that is you, and that you will remember her words and her message of compassion and love and awesomeness.
Thanks, Lori and Wayne. Indeed inspirational for all of us. They are willing to do a little Q&A here for a few minutes. A couple of quick observations. Wayne, if you need an update on the Kardashians, I think Bruce and Kim are split, and Lamar and Chloe are on the rocks. And I don't know what that says about my parenting, but we just want to thank you again. And we tried to do some rebranding here at Stritch, and we're kind of excited about the tagline of increasing awesome and decreasing world suck, but we didn't think that the sisters of the board would go for that, but it sums it up pretty well, I think, what we're trying to do here as well. So seriously, we invite you to ask a couple of questions of the Earls, and please know that they're excited about signing some books. The star won't go out, and they would be willing to sign the dedication page on the Fault of Our Stars as well. And after the Q&A, we'll have a reception out here, and we hope you can join us for some more time together. So please come forward if you have a question. We'd welcome that.
So this book is made up of a lot of different things, her journals and her drawings and her letters to you and blog posts. Were these all compiled by you, and how did you decide what went into the book?
We worked with our publisher. We in choosing the entries that are in the book. It isn't all of her journal entries, but we couldn't get them to do a book big enough to include all our journal entries. So they said that we have to focus on just the last couple of years. 2 years. And this is the majority of her writings. We did very little editing of her writings. We did finally have to agree with our publisher when she said we had to standardize the punctuation, all of you English teachers out there, because Esther went through several years where she didn't like punctuation at all, so there was no punctuation, nothing. Yeah. E.E. Cummings style. and then half of the time her journals did have punctuation because she loved fonts. One thing you might not know, and you didn't ask me this, but I'll tell you, but if you look along the top of the pages, you'll see what looks like a script. It says, Esther Grace Earl, and throughout the book you'll see some spots, and that's actually, it's a new font that was designed by Esther's online friends called Esther Font. It's made from her own writing, and it's now a copyrighted font that we own. So
we do?
Well, eventually, after Penguin gives it back to us.
That's a brave soul. Thank you for coming up here.
It's a great question.
Yep.
There you go.
Thank you so much for sharing, especially after only 4 years. It's a short time when you're grieving as a parent for your child. I know I've been grieving for 16 years for my baby. But what I want to ask you is the statistic is 90% of couples who lose a child will maybe divorce after the loss. And I wanted to ask you, how did you guys keep it together and be there for each other when you're both, maybe on separate pages with that?
That's a good point. I think it's sort of Esther's trick to us, I think, because we were kind of doing our own thing, not in our lives, but we were very involved separately, and it's like this book forced us to come back together as we began to talk about her story and her life. So, did we mention at the beginning that we've been in Wisconsin? We honeymooned in Wisconsin.
That's right.
And that was 30 years ago.
Wisconsin,
this past summer.
Lake Delton.
But
don't know much about the area, but we were here.
But that's first, you know, and I should have started by saying that I'm so sorry about your loss of your child.
Thank you.
And 16 years, I don't think 4 years or 4 months or 16 years or 30 years will probably make a difference for anyone who's lost a child and somebody very close to them. But it is true, because we do have friends who have been through divorce after the loss of a child. In one case, the wife seemed to get very involved with trying to promote causes that she felt would be important to her son, which is how a lot of parents cope. But the husband was full of anger and couldn't let go of all of the things that had gone wrong, and it drove them finally apart. So that it is a terrible thing that stress and obstacles like that can separate us when we need each other so much. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I married my best friend, and so that's what's helped me. So that's what's working.
Could you tell us how your other children are doing and the impact that Esther's made on them?
Well, you know, Abe is now, he was only 6 when Esther left, and he just turned 11. Graham is 18, special needs. And Graham, after 4 years, you know, he's in Esther's room, her bedroom, and he still talks to her and is, you know, sad that she's gone, and he won't speak her name. He kind of confused her with Voldemort, I think. It's like the name you don't say. You know that, that sister, you know, he starts with an E. So he's got his own way of dealing with it, but and then Abe, obviously there's a lot of anxiety issues for them, and our girls were just here, of course. The thing is, you know, you have this experience and people want to hear about Esther, and you talk about her, and you have to be careful about all the other kids because they don't want to hear about it. You know, they don't want to hear about Esther all the time. And Abraham just said something the other day. What was it that he said?
He just said that he was really sad because he said, you know, every time you talk about Esther, it makes me feel sad, and so I wish we could just forget about her. And I said, well, do you really want to forget about her? He says, well, no, but I don't want to be sad all the time. And so I said, well, do you know why I talk about Esther? And I said, do you know that she got sick, and we want to make a difference for other families so that they don't lose a child to cancer. And so we want to help families because we've gotten real involved with advocacy and awareness, childhood cancer awareness. And he's come with me too. So I'm trying to include him in some of those events. Our son, who's 18, went to a bereavement camp this last summer, and Abe wouldn't go, but he has 2 friends who just lost their mom about 3 months ago to cancer. And so I'm scheming already. I'm going to get the 3 of them to the camp together where they can help each other, because we need each other. We often say that we are so privileged because to lose a child in a car accident or from a gunshot or from something sudden, it just takes my breath away.
Right.
And we knew we had to live with the pain a lot, but we had so many years and time to, you know, we tried not to pretend that it wasn't happening while we kept hoping for good. So that's, and the balance of how to deal with our kids now is the same balance you have when you have a child that's sick. How do you deal with that balance of not giving all of your time to one child who needs it so desperately and yet still not forget your other kids? So that's a common theme that we run into with people who have kids that are chronically ill.
And I just want to add one thing. You know, there's that whole King Lear, thing about earning the affection of your daughters, you know, of your family members. You know, you can't just demand it. You can't say you will love me and you will feel good about me, you know, as your parent. You know, and we made bad decisions, but you know, God's going to work it out. We have the respect and love of our kids, and We just have to let them grieve in their own way. And that's the most precious thing in the world for me. And when Esther died, that day she died, the first thing I did, intentionally, thought it through, I just put my arms around my daughters as we were crying and said it shouldn't be this way. In the perfect world, it wouldn't be this way, and I am so sorry. And I really don't know what it's like to lose your best friend, your sibling. But they have to grieve in their own way, and it never will go away. The pain is like it's always there. It's like, somebody said you cut off a limb. You don't have a limb. You can adjust to it. You can live with it, but it's missing. And so she's always going to be gone. I see a 20-year-old in this case. That's Esther's age. But our kids are remarkable and amazing, and we haven't hid anything from them. If anything, we've probably done too much. So we have to be wise with that too. But that's part of the fun of navigating 30 years of marital bliss. Started right here in the cheese capital of the world. Thank you.
Lori, if you could just kind of come down here in front of the podium, and we ask Nancy Kendall to join you. We just, for a moment, want to, in our small way, give thanks to the both of you for making tonight a special occasion, and appreciate all that you've done, and really are blessed to have you been a part of this.